All right, 3, 2, 1. Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you are and still in the mood of watching this. I'm right in the middle of DC with Jacob Grandstaff of still the Capital Research Institute sometimes, right?
Yes, I'm freelancing for them still.
Freelancing still for Capital Research Institute. The older subscribers might remember Jacob from the podcast that we did. Was it 3 months ago, 4 months ago?
Yes, February, I believe.
About 3 months ago, yeah. So, when I got there, I'm going to DC, I gotta meet Jacob in person so I can get to ask him a lot more, because you were in a hurry last time when we spoke.
Yes,
you had a certain event that you had to attend to. So perhaps this time you're not that in a hurry, and I get to unpack you a little bit.
Unpack me a little bit more, yeah. I don't have anywhere to go today, so I'm good.
That's fantastic. We're gonna spend the next 20 hours here joking. Yeah. Right. That last time you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself properly. We just introduced you fast into he's the guy who wrote that long series, which was remarkably precise most of the time. So please, by all means, introduce yourself.
Absolutely.
Now.
So I went to my major in college was history. So my goal originally was to be a community college, because in the United States we have a 2-year college program. So I was going to teach that, because I don't have to have a doctorate degree to do that. So I taught 2 years of high school while I was in grad school. And I started looking at different options to see what else I could do with a history degree. And I realized some history majors become journalists. So I had an opportunity. There was an organization, it's a conservative organization on college campuses called Young America's Foundation. So they have an internship program for aspiring journalists, and they call it the National Journalism Center. So I applied, got accepted in 2017, and last summer I came to DC, moved up here. Moved to Maryland because it's cheaper. So,
I stayed in Maryland too for the exact same reason. Well, I said I'll be in the DC area, but in Maryland it's much cheaper.
The University of North, because there's university students, they drive the cost of rent down. Yeah. So, but anyway, the way National Journalism Center works is they pay you, so you technically intern with them, but they place you with different news organizations. So some of the interns go with the Daily Caller, others with the Washington Times. It's mostly there was one guy who went with USA Today, but it's mostly conservative outlets. They placed me with Capital Research Center because it's not a news organization; it's a think tank. So they know most history majors are not going to do journalism. So I went there, and Capital Research Center extended my time with them. They hired me for the fall to work short term, and it was sometime at the end. It was actually in December. I think it might have been November. I got an email. They send emails saying, hey, here's a story. We might could run an article on it. But this article was on Romania. It was the Romanian Parliament. They were debating whether or not to limit NGOs the amount of money, or not limit the amount of money they can spend. They were going to force. It was a bill they were debating that would force NGOs to tell if they had foreign sources that had donated to them,
especially non-EU sources.
Exactly, yes. And also, it was going to limit the NGOs that could be considered public utilities. If they had done a political lobbying within the previous 2 years, then they wouldn't be able to be called public utilities. So we thought that might be interesting, and so I did a little bit. We had already written about Soros's involvement in Hungary. So at that point, I didn't realize that he had been involved anywhere else in Eastern Europe but Hungary. Mm-hmm. So I did a little bit more research into it, a little bit more investigation, and I realized that he had been all over Eastern Europe. He had pumped 1.6 billion into the region. So I thought, I can read the Romanian language. I can't read Macedonian or Albanian, these other languages, so I'll just focus on that. I'll see what he's done in Romania. So I thought I might can get 1 or 2 articles out of this and tie it into the bill that they're debating in Parliament to see this is why they're afraid of Soros's foundations. And so my original goal was to do 1, maybe 2 articles and focus on how Soros was involved in the color revolutions and how the Social Democratic Party in Romania might be a little bit concerned that his foundations might try to overthrow their government, or their ruling government, their coalition. But as I did more investigation, I started realizing that it wasn't just Soros' foundations. USAID and the U.S. State Department and the U.S. Embassy had been helping Soros all along. They had been allies with him. In many cases, even though Soros has plenty of money, USAID had actually been given...
USAID has been bankrolling his foundations quite... Not so much in Romania, but in Macedonia, there was quite a huge
Yes,
scandal.
it was huge. It was millions of dollars, and that's what I noticed in Romania. The USAID they had their own programs. Soros had his programs, but what they noticed in Romania, this might have been why they started giving money to his foundation in Macedonia, was because in Romania, Soros was accomplishing more with a third of what USAID was. Because Soros, I mean, the guy's a terrible person, but he is extremely smart. I mean, you got to give him credit for
of course. I never assume leftists are stupid. I just assume they're bastards.
Exactly.
They usually are.
Yeah, he's a very intelligent bastard. But the thing is, the State Department, they saw Soros is he's spending $10 million and he's accomplishing twice as much as we are with $30 million. So why don't we, instead of wasting money, we could just give the money to his foundation. Mm-hmm. So, but anyway, so make a long story short, I started, one thing led to another, and I thought, even though this is going to stray a little bit off the Soros trail, nobody else is covering the meddling that the U.S. Embassy is doing in Romania's affairs.
Especially not in English, yeah.
Exactly, definitely not in English. So I thought I've got to add a few extra, episodes in there to talk about the embassy meddling. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how it developed into 10 episodes.
Right. The reason you even got on my radar in the first place is because someone in the Freedom Alternative Network noticed that you used some, I did tell you this in the podcast too, but you used some of the sources that at least we on the Romanian right, we consider them shady. Yeah. And the reason is because some of them have funding from the Kremlin. And as I'm sure you know, there's Duginism and there's all the influence that the Kremlin is trying to exert on the right.
Definitely.
So that's why we're kind of a bit afraid of that. And because of that, you phrased it in such a way that it appeared to help the Social Democrats. And you said that was not your intention, and I fully believe that is the case. But in the end, did that accomplish anything? Did that wake up anyone in this beltway? What was the outcome of your article, the impact?
The impact that I was hoping it would eventually have, and I have had several people contact me here in the States say, this is, but the thing is, unfortunately, a lot of times, because America is so polarized today, a lot of times you're just preaching to the choir. So, but that was really what my intention was. I really did want to target American conservatives to kind of inform them that Soros and U.S. embassies are teaming up together to promote left-wing causes. And before my series, I believe Judicial Watch was the only one that had really focused and zeroed in on that aspect of U.S. embassies teaming up with Soros.
Yeah, there was also another one, I don't remember, also a conservative outlet that wrote a little bit about Soros' involvement in Macedonia, also teaming up with the USA. But yeah, overall,
the Daily Caller has done a little bit.
Not Daily Caller, it's someone with the right background. I don't remember the name of the site. Daily Sentinel or something like that it was. Something with Sentinel. Daily Signal. Daily Signal.
That's what Heritage Foundations.
Yeah, the Heritage Foundations, yeah. They covered the meddling in Macedonia, but yeah, for Romania and Hungary, not much of coverage. How do you know so much about Eastern Europe? Because to me, it's especially considering, I don't want to take this the wrong way, but considering your age, I mean, there are seasoned political operatives in Eastern Europe that can keep up with you, but in many ways, more than the average person in Hungary or in Romania or in Macedonia. How do you know so much?
Well, I would say it's mainly, of course, because having a command of English and Romanian, being able to read both languages, but also Capital Research Center, I will give them, even though they're a small organization, they are extremely good investigators, good investigative journalists. And they've got one, Dr. Stephen J. Allen, he's their vice president. He is extremely good. And so I was kind of like his assistant whenever I was there. And I learned a lot from him. So I really tried to soak in as much as I could, as much of the tactics and the skills that he had. So I've got to give a lot of the credit to Capital Research and the training I got from them.
So they taught you agitprop.
They taught me what?
They taught you agitprop. Agitation and propaganda.
Agitprop. Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
I think conservatives should be using that a lot more.
That's the thing. The left. That's what really irks me is I look at stuff like Vice News, Fox, Huffington Post, and I'm thinking to myself,
Daily Kos.
Yeah, I'm thinking to myself, even though these people are full of shit, they are some of the best journalists that you could possibly imagine. Like, we don't have anybody on the right that's even comes close. And a lot of these people are just college kids, but they make sure they train their journalists. And that's one thing. The National Journalism Center is really the only program that I know of on the right. The Daily Caller has a fellowship, but there's very, very few compared to the left that really train young, aspiring journalists.
Yeah, this is what I've been saying for quite some time, a lot, especially in the last 6 months on this channel when I started really focusing a lot on agitation and propaganda. They said, look, we need our own version of the Common Purpose. I don't know if you know Common Purpose in the UK. It's an organization that trains not just journalists, but bureaucrats and city hall officials. And it's a far left Freemasonry, if you want. I mean, because they're very secretive about what they teach. But the point is that they all walk in lockstep with the left-wing agenda once they get out from there. There's very few dissenters, and we need something like that for the non-left, for sure.
Yeah, and one thing that's really missing on the right is long form. We don't have a lot of really good long form journalists or even long form journalism outlets. The Free Beacon is a really good investigative
their investigations on spending on lesbian courses and studying lesbianism in Wales. And
I hadn't noticed that, but they do a lot of different stuff that really...
Yeah, but even discovering those means sifting through hundreds and hundreds of pages of federal regulations and federal papers and sponsorships.
They must spend all day reading documents and stuff. But yeah, they're a good outlet, but they really do more short form. Like they don't do long form investigative pieces like you would find with the New York Times or other major newspapers. The Washington Times is really the only major conservative newspaper around.
And I would argue, I mean, Epoch Times, where do they stand? Because I picked up a copy of the Epoch Times like about an hour ago, and then I started reading through it, and it looked pretty good to me.
It's conservative. Yeah. I've seen the Epoch Times, but I don't think I've ever read it. So,
so I guess it's not that popular here. Right. One more question about Eastern Europe, and then we go to U.S. politics. Give me your assessment, and it's not to argue with you. I really don't care whether you agree with me or not, but give me your assessment about Romanian politics now or in this period.
Well, you kind of got conservatives in Romania are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. You've got the PSD, which is left wing, but at the same time, the PSD, they're not globalists in the sense that Soros is disciple. The Democrats are the sort. They're more the old school left wingers. I disagree with the assessment that most of them are communist. I think in the 90s that might be the case, but today the new generation of PSD, I think they're more in line with old school Democrats. Like they're socialists, but they're not hardcore left wingers. And then you got the so-called liberals who they're not exactly libertarians, but they're much better than the PSD on economics, definitely.
Yeah, you know what we call PNL in Romania? Partidul Niciodată Liberal. The never liberal party, basically.
I heard in one of your podcasts. I remember listening to your Romanian podcast, and he said that. But yeah, it's kind of rough. I mean, if I were Romanian, I would probably vote PDL, just because there's not really anybody else to vote for over there, unless it's a third-party candidate that might stand a chance of winning. I know in Europe it's much easier for third-party candidates to win. Here you're kind of wasting your vote if you vote for a third party. But the problem though is that not PDL, PNL, they have
PDL
a lot
ceased to exist. They merged into PNL actually.
And got rid of Brătianu's party, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But the problem with them is that's kind of where all the Sorosists have made their home, because the PSD was in opposition to Băsescu and in opposition to Macovei whenever she was Minister of Justice. So you got a lot of libertarian globalists involved in that party. But I don't know, for conservatives in Romania, I think the best thing probably is just to take over the PNL. That would probably be the best option. Make
PNL great again.
Make USL great again. So kick all the globalists out, send them over to USL. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Speaking of, we were talking. There is a guy, one of the founders of modern day PNL, Viorel Cataramă. The guy has a very Trumpian type of speech and whatnot. And we were thinking about maybe we should propel him a little bit further up in the leadership of the party. So yeah, believe it or not, we're actually considering taking over.
Yeah. Let me ask you, what is your opinion of Liviu Pleșoian?
Not a good one.
You don't have a good one?
No, not a good one. I mean, the guy is blowing his horns, but if you look at his track record.
Is he more leftist on economic policy?
And I'm sure you know this. This is a recurring problem in mainstream right-wing politics in Romania. I mean, you get the culture right, but then you got a lot of them that don't get the economics right.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what Italy is up against now. I mean,
there is a reason our languages are similar. Our cultures are also similar.
Yeah. I mean, you got the populism. You just kind of you want to give, and it's the same way with England. A lot of the Brexiteers, they support
they're economically left wing.
Yeah, they support the social health care. The socialist health care. They support it 100%. So yeah, that is a problem. I think what you know about the Mises Institute, right?
Yes.
What Eastern Europe could really use, I know there's a lot of Bulgarians that have latched onto the Ron Paul movement and have really been trying to spread libertarian views in Bulgaria. But I think Eastern Europeans, they could really use, because they're socially conservative, most of them. They could really use a good Mises Institute in Eastern Europe.
There is a Mises Institute in Bucharest, actually, and I know the coordinator, but I don't know, maybe they're lacking funding or whatever, because I'm going to talk to the coordinator in June, about 3 weeks from now, because Dennis Prager is coming to Bucharest, so I'm going to Bucharest to meet Dennis Prager, of course, and also to meet several other people from our beltway, I guess. So yeah, there is a Mises Institute. I mean, the structure already exists. I guess the point is to make it bigger, and that's going to take some time. But yeah, taking over PNLA, that's exactly what we were discussing about 3 months ago.
And I mean, eventually, hopefully, you could get to a point where, I mean, if the PSD is the worst you have to worry about on the left, then
that's good.
That's
what I keep saying to the conservatives, because there is such thing as worse than PSD. That would be USR, Uniunea Salvației România, the Save Romanian Union. I don't know if you've been keeping up with them.
Well, yeah, I meant USR. I said USL.
USL was in the past, the Social Liberal Union. That was one of the biggest mistakes of PNL to get in with that shit. But yeah, USR. What's your assessment about USR?
That was the breakaway from USL?
No. USR is that one, the party with the blue and the made by Nicu Șordan. I don't know.
That's the one I was thinking about.
Yeah.
USR. Yeah. I mean, it's straight progressive. I mean, Nicu Șordan, didn't he get out once they flew over the marriage issue?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, so it was even too left wing for him. But yeah.
Even though he's a deep left.
Yeah. Yeah. But the thing is, like, he wasn't necessarily against homosexuality. He's just like, if y'all were going to be sticklers about it, then I can't be with you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's straight progressive. I mean, it's worse, probably worse than most Democrats. I mean, it's like a millennial Democrat. In fact, was it Vice News? I think it might have been Vice News did it was Vice News American version. They did actually a feature on USR. And,
really? Somehow I missed that, and I follow Vice News.
Yeah, but it was anyway. They interviewed this one girl. She worked on the Bernie Sanders campaign. She lived in, I think, Chicago or whatever. So they have a lot of influence by American left-wing liberals. So it's straight poison for Romania, in my opinion.
It is. Right. Let's shift gears to this city and this country. A lot of things have been changing, especially culturally. I mean, I didn't think that I would be able to see. I was queuing for coffee just a few blocks down the street, and there was an entire family. They were speaking Spanish to each other, and the guy had a MAGA hat and the American flag off his backpack, and I'm like, the left doesn't even understand its own country. I mean, the American left. What is your assessment about how the culture has been changing? Because it has been changing in the last 3 or 4 years in this country.
Well, so to go on that, I guess on that path, we'd be talking about how the changing ethnic.
No, not the ethnic change, but the cultural change. I mean, the shift in mindset. Something has shifted in the mindset of a significant portion of Americans. Former liberals, lifelong blue dog Democrats. They were like, no, we're going Trump. Even people who did not vote for Trump in 2016, they're like, we're voting Trump in 2020.
The best way I could explain it is imagine if Soros's NGOs in Romania controlled the entire university system, the entire school system of the country, and took control of it back in the 1960s. That's the situation in the United States. One of the reasons why I decided against going into academia was because I knew that I would probably get fired from the first university teaching job that I got, just because I believe it's the Daily Caller, they actually did a survey of different professions, history professions, sociology. In the history field, it's about a 9-to-1 ratio of registered Democrats and registered Republicans, and even the registered Republicans in the history field are so far to the left that they're really rhinos. They're not actual Republicans. So it's very hard to find a conservative. It's very hard to find an American history teacher in an American university who actually loves America, who actually loves American history. And it's because in the 1960s, I don't know if you've ever heard of the historian Howard Zinn.
Yes, I have.
He was
I read his book.
Yeah, he was far more influential. And the thing is, like, even people like him, they were reviled during their lifetime, but they had such an influence on academia that today most people that love this country aren't interested in history, because all they know about history was our ancestors were horrible people who murdered a bunch of people, but we have no reason to honor them, respect them, or love them. Mm-hmm. So they don't have any interest in history. The ones that do have an interest in history are the radicals or the revolutionaries who want to transform society, because they see American history as being, fascist, basically. And that's why I believe most of it comes down to history, the teaching of history in schools. History is where patriotism is built or lost, and in this country it's mostly been lost because of academia.
Mm-hmm. Well, mostly being lost, you mean that's in the cities, because I've been to the countryside as well throughout the last week, and it's very much alive there.
It is, but the problem is within the next 3 or 4 decades, there's going to be a huge migration from the country to the cities. Mm-hmm. And we've already seen that in the past couple of decades, and as that happens, the country ends up moving left, mm-hmm. because most country people, when they move to the cities, they want to try to find a job and fit in, and they eventually, even if they don't adapt to the culture, their kids do. Mm-hmm. And so that's, in my opinion, the battle isn't going to be won or lost in the country; it's going to be won or lost in the cities. Mm-hmm. And that's where conservatives have to take the offensive. They have to, fit in with hipster culture, do whatever you have to do to convert people that are on the fence or apolitical.
Mm-hmm. Right, because you said that Howard Zinn was reviled during his lifetime, but he had such an influence overall. And I was thinking, nobody is a prophet during his lifetime. Yeah. Nobody is a prophet during his village. Conservatives lately, I would say about in the last 20 years or so, have forgotten that. And there's very few conservatives that are playing the long game these days. Mm-hmm. They're all thinking about the next election or the next election cycle. But nobody's thinking, 6 or 7 election cycles from now. Mm-hmm. How do we get some of that back? I mean, we were mentioning right before we turned on the cameras, we were mentioning how Horowitz is one of the people who understands long game, mm-hmm. But there are not very few, not enough of them. How do we get more Jacob Grandstaffs, basically?
Well, one problem is part of the problem is generational. Most young conservatives are hardcore conservatives, unless they're in the upper echelons of the Republican Party, or their families have financial ties to major East Coast cities. Most younger conservatives do understand the long game. The problem is they don't control the movement. The conservative movement is controlled by people who are older and do think in the short term, because they do have money invested in the conservative movement.
The short term outcome.
Exactly, and they're thinking, I'm not going to be around in 60 years when this culture shifts to the right. But also, there is a strain of conservatism that is scared to death of fascism. Mm-hmm. And it showed itself whenever Donald Trump was running. Now, Donald Trump is about the furthest thing from a fascist that there could be. He's a populist. Now, populism doesn't automatically mean fascism. And a lot of conservatives, particularly the premier conservative news magazine, National Review, purposely opposed Trump. They even opposed him during the general election. Mm-hmm. And when you have that kind of, it's because they wanted to control the movement. They saw the movement moving to a position on the right that they couldn't control. And what it comes down to is you have elites in the conservative movement, just like you have elites in the liberal movement, and they're scared of pitchfork conservatives. They don't want the populists taking over the country.
Well, this has happened before with the Tea Party, which was also deeply opposed by the Beltway. And when it comes to National Review, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like National Review most of the time. I read them most but sometimes I have to agree with Milo Yiannopoulos on this, namely that it's filled with people who genuinely believe that writing a nice essay on National Review counts as doing something, whereas in reality, doing something means like, I mean, Ben Shapiro, he was a never Trumper, but he's doing a lot more than the National Review people. And even I have to give to Ben Shapiro, he wore a MAGA hat on his podcast when he was proven wrong. Mm-hmm. But most of them, I'm thinking, let's say David French, also from National Review, he finally came around with the Trump issue, but many of them.
Really, I didn't hear about that one.
Well, he's less hostile than he used to be.
Oh, okay, that's
for sure. For sure.
Yeah, I got so turned off to David French. I think I stopped reading him last September.
Yeah, last September he was still hostile, but now it's getting a little bit better. I mean, he even has an article called like the top 40 nice things that Trump did, and I was like, I can't believe. Seriously? So yeah.
Well, I think one thing is once a lot of these conservatives saw what Trump was going to do in office, they saw his record, they saw who he really was. They eventually came around. They understood, okay, this guy's not going to round up Mexicans and put them in concentration camps, that type of thing. So I think that's once they saw his record, they got pulled around.
Yeah, because on policy, when he was talking policy in the campaign, I wagered, I put money where my mouth was. I bet in. I placed $500 bet in February that Trump will win. On a chance of 7-1, and of course I won. But even then, I was still concerned a little bit on some issues. He was a little bit too radical. But then when he got into the White House, the rhetoric did not necessarily match the policy. The policy was much more sound and much more tolerable and even very good than the rhetoric. So basically, I think even if I agree with and I wanted Trump to win, even I got carried on a little bit by the fact that at the end of the day, the guy's a showman. So he's going to do everything he can to sell the policy, and then he'll implement the policy much closer to what I guess you and I would expect.
Yeah, and one thing, the problem is because we live in such a short soundbite culture, most people didn't actually look at the policy proposals that Donald Trump was putting forward and matching them to, say, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio. Most conservatives, they said that then when he was running, and they're of the same opinion today, that Donald Trump was the most liberal candidate in the Republican field. His rhetoric was far right, but his actual policy positions were very left-wing. I mean, even on transgender bathrooms, he's not that conservative.
Yeah, no, but he still thinks that it should be devolved to the states,
and that's the one. But see, the thing is, where most conservatives they would like the president to have the same opinion, but it's okay if he does, as long as he believes in federalism. But that's just one example. There's many others. Another thing is tariffs. Most conservatives, if you're an economic conservative, believe in free trade. That's another part where he's very much to the left. But then again, that's kind of his populist appeal. He's trying to appeal to the former Democrats, the blue dog Democrats. So,
which might work, by the way.
It's showing that it's working. And I mean, I think some tariffs are fine as long as you're not favoring an industry. Like I would be fine with a flat 10% or even 15% tariff across all industries. The problem is when you're favoring one industry over another. But yeah, on a lot of policies, he was actually to the left of most Republicans.
Yeah, although on the tariff issues, this is exactly what I was talking to Bob before you come. On the tariff issue, there is a point to be made that there is a difference. The free trade has to be also fair.
Exactly.
Because when you're dealing with unfaithful actors, and I'm thinking here specifically about China, you got to do something. I mean, you just cannot allow the partner to continue to be unfair and continue to basically exploit you. Because sure, the Democrats were saying, oh, look, some of the jobs are not coming back and whatnot. Sure, that's true. Part of it is natural, but still, it doesn't have to be that fast. It doesn't have to be in this way just because we go dogmatically on no tariffs, no nothing. I mean, there has to be some instruments, maybe not tariffs, maybe something else.
The interesting thing is, before we had the income tax, tariffs were the number one raiser of money.
Until 1912.
Exactly, yeah. And so, I mean, I would be fine with tariffs, but see, the thing is with China is they're stealing so much of our technology. They're pirating so much of our technology.
Yeah, they don't abide by intellectual property at all.
Exactly, and from that perspective, you do need to apply punitive measures to that particular country. But as far as if we're losing the so-called trade war on, say, I don't know, beef to China or some other country, I wouldn't be in favor of favoring that industry just to help that industry out.
What about Europe? Because the European leaders, I'm thinking here about cucks like Jean-Claude Juncker. He finally, he suddenly discovered free trade when Trump started talking about tariffs. And I'm like, hold on a second. The European Union tariffs American goods to the teeth. I mean, Europe has a lot of socialist protectionist bollocks, a lot more than even the most radical ideas of Donald Trump. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise because Trump keep on insisting on these kind of things. Maybe it will force some other places to open up a little bit and start being a bit closer on a playing field, if you know what I mean. Because at this moment, while we're taping this, is not a fair trade when Europeans can export anything here, mostly tariff free, but the other way around is not is not reciprocated. I mean, maybe we should have, and I say we as in we, the NATO, we Judeo-Christian civilization. At the very least, we should have some sort of reciprocal, just like with visas. I travel visa-free in your country, you travel visa-free in mine. Why can't we have that with economics too?
With Juncker, I think he's going to mainly attack Trump on anything, and that was just one because he disagrees with Trump's view of NATO, so he's going to jump on anything. But yeah, I agree. But see, the problem is with the European Union, if I'm not mistaken, if we're negotiating tariffs, we can't negotiate with Germany on individual.
Yeah, no. You can negotiate individually with Romania, with Croatia, with the UK. Well, while they're still in the Union, countries that still have their own currency and they're not part of the Schengen agreement. Only those. So Romania, Croatia, Bulgaria, UK, and I believe Norway. Well, Norway is not in the European Union,
just in the Schengen agreement. Those countries you have to negotiate with as a pact.
Those that are in the Schengen, especially those that are both in Schengen and the Eurozone, they use the euro currency, those have to be negotiated as a pact. So you're basically, if you want to punish Germany, you're going to end up punishing Lithuania as well, even though Lithuania did nothing wrong.
Right. Yeah, that's
fucked up.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Yeah, that's one thing that's. But see, in that situation, I mean, I think we should have tariffs. I think it should be flat, though. Like, I'm not in favor of saying, we'll drop our tariffs on. We can have free trade on automobiles, but we'll have tariffs on another industry because you're favoring the automobile industry over the corn industry or some other industry.
Yeah, that's.
I see tariffs as a good revenue. It can help native business. But at the same time, I see it mostly as a revenue. I see it as a means to lower the income tax. Like, if we raise tariffs, we can lower the income tax. And the manufacturers are happy in the process.
How do you make this case to the voters? Because even though lowering income taxes and generally lowering taxes is a popular cause in the United States, at the same time, look at how much flack Trump got for a very moderate tax reform.
Well, I mean, obviously the Democrats aren't interested in lowering taxes at all. They want a more of a European-style income tax. They would be happy with a 40% top
Please
bracket.
don't do that. Please don't do that.
Well, I mean, see, they look back at the glory days. They say, well, after World War II, we had a 90% income tax.
Yeah, but who was paying that?
Exactly. Nobody paid that crap. But it was John F. K. Interestingly that lowered it. But anyway, that's a different story.
But back in the days when the Democrats were not that Democrats.
Exactly. Yeah. But see, on the income tax issue, you would have to have a Republican supermajority to get serious tax reform through, and even in the Republican parties, you'd have to have serious conservatives who are interested in lowering the income tax, interested in drop. I mean, I would love a flat tax. We could have like a 15% flat tax and jack tariffs up to compensate for a lot of it. That would be, to me, that would be the ideal situation.
Yeah, it certainly sounds a lot fairer than what it is now or what it was before Trump's reform.
Ideally, we would eventually like to get rid of the IRS, but that's for my grandkids.
Yeah, that's for I mean, in fairness, the IRS is not even constitutional, so it should not even exist to begin with. But let's talk a little bit more about the tax reform, because the tax reform was, in my opinion, one of the most moderate policies that came out under the Trump administration, because it just lowered the corporate taxes to European levels, and the left opposed it. I mean, you said yourself, well, they want a more European model. Well, why did they oppose the tax reform?
Well, I don't think this particular tax reform. Trump could have come out with he could have said we're going to lower it 0.5%. They would have still tried to speak to their base and tell their base that this is going to take from the poor and give to the rich. We're giving corporations a tax break. For them, that was just political leverage. They couldn't go along with it because they knew that businesses were going to give their employees bonuses. They knew it was going to help the economy, and they couldn't go along with it because if it passed, then obviously it would hurt them in the midterms. So for them, it was just playing up the old talking points that we're giving businesses, we're giving major corporations a tax break, we're giving the wealthy a tax break. Trump is helping out his wealthy cronies. So with this past tax break, Trump could have proposed anything, and they would have opposed it.
I see. Yeah, well, that sort of makes sense. What do you think is? Where do you think the American left is going? Because, doubling down on identity politics and doubling down on all this nonsense, it's obviously not going to work. So where do you think they're going?
I think they're going straight for identity politics. I believe that they are betting on the demographics. They're betting on that they can have enough minorities to be able to win through identity politics alone. There was a really good piece in, I'm trying to remember his name. It's in the American Conservative. It came out last week. It was pointing out, it was attacking, not really attacking, it was criticizing conservatives for accusing Democrats of being socialists. And it was talking about Elizabeth Warren. It was saying, you know, when you listen to her policy, she's not really a socialist. Most Democrats, they're really not. When you think of Marxists, they're not economic Marxists. They're pushing the cultural agenda. They want to transform the culture. They want to completely transform Western civilization, overthrow it. That's their goal. It's not necessarily economic socialism. So I think if conservatives are going to win the culture war, they're going to have to fight the culture war. And they're scared to death to go there because they're afraid if we fight the culture war, they're going to accuse us of being racist. They're going to accuse us of being xenophobic, of being fascist. But when was the last time that the Democrats didn't accuse conservatives of being xenophobic, racist, and fascist?
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, they're already throwing everything they can at you. Why not go ahead and take advantage of it? That's what Trump did. That's how he won in 2016. I honestly don't think that any other Republican candidate could have beat Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Because no other Republican candidate was willing to take the fight to the Democrats on their level. They were still fighting like it was 1984.
When everyone is polite, and you know the Democrats were not that radical.
Exactly. Well, in 1984, the Democrats still believed that this country is a melting pot.
Yeah.
In 1994, I can't remember her name, Barbara, California senator. California senator. She's still in the Senate now, but in 1994, there's a video on YouTube of her attacking illegal immigration. She's saying we've got too many illegals coming in. They're filling up our prison system. They're taking our jobs. And it's killing me that I can't remember her name. But anyway, she's one of the most liberal senators. And of course now she's all for illegals because the demographics changed. And it was about politics. She knew that she had to change her position if she wanted to continue to win re-election in California. And that's what Democrats are banking on. But, if Republicans... Here's the thing. Mexicans are not going to continue to be a minority. If you go back to the 1920s, Italians were a minority. The Irish were still a minority. They still lived in their Irish and Italian enclaves. Today, most Italians and Irish they're
Americans.
They're Americans. They know as much about their heritage as I know about mine, which is they came from Holland, Germany, Scotland. I don't know who they were, that type of thing. That's the thing. Mexicans, they're not going to continue to be a minority. The great-grandkids of the Mexicans that are here now probably won't even speak Spanish, and if they do, they'll speak it with an English accent. Yeah. So the point is, the left continually banks on being able to get minority votes, but what happens when the minorities cease to be minorities? Then you got to go find another minority, and that's why they're continually trying to find. That's why they're pushing intersectionality. Because if you push intersectionality,
you can have perpetual minorities.
You can have perpetual minorities. Everybody is a minority. You've got a small clique of Anglo-Saxon white men whose ancestors lived here in 1700 who are not minorities, but everybody else is a minority, and we can build on this identity politics. But yeah, that's why they're pushing intersectionality so much, because they know that that's the only chance of winning. Socialism was rejected in this country, has been rejected overwhelmingly, and Bill Clinton was fairly right-wing on economic policy.
Yes.
So the Democrats lost the economic war with Jimmy. Even Jimmy Carter he cut a lot of regulation. So the Democrats pretty much lost the economic war in the 1970s when Keynesianism blew up, when we had stagflation, we had economic stagnation with inflation in the 1970s. That was when the Democrats' pipe dream of the New Deal and their Keynesian economics really went to pot. And after that, they didn't have an economic agenda to run on. Now, they can run on Bill Clinton's agenda, but Bill Clinton's agenda is just a slightly left-wing form of Ronald Reaganism.
Yes.
So, let's raise the income tax up to 38% instead of 36%, but let's still cut regulation and that type of thing. Let's have welfare reform. Yeah. So, they can't really run on that because it's so close to the Republican agenda. So they have to find something to galvanize. They have to find a base. They don't have that economic base anymore. It was the Midwesterners, it was the Southern white farmers, the Rust Belt and Southern white farmers, and even rural black farmers who propelled Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That constituency doesn't exist anymore. And so they have to form a new constituency.
Especially after the constituency found out what Franklin Delano Roosevelt believed about the constituency.
That was one thing that helped break it up. But also Harry Truman went to the left and lost a lot of voters. But the thing is, they don't have that economic populism anymore, and the right has actually taken over the economic populism. So they've got to try to find some kind of ethno-nationalist populism to run on. And all the diversity they claim they're promoting is really just a coalition coalition of ethno-nationalists trying to keep their ethno-nationalism alive in the United States.
And then they accuse the right of being ethno-nationalists and ethno-supremacists,
exactly,
which is really funny.
Like if you like the few hundred alt-right people that there are in this country, if you look at what they actually believe,
they would fit into the Democrat Party just fine.
They would fit in. I mean, if you just change the color of their skin, they really fit in with the Black Lives Matter groups very well. You know, so which this is a little bit of a detour, but it's kind of relevant. Are you familiar with the Ku Klux Klan?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the Ku Klux Klan, of course, it had its heyday in the 1920s. I'm trying to remember. Marcus Garvey was a black nationalist who wanted to move black people out of this continent and form their own country. He spoke at a Ku Klux Klan rally because the Ku Klux Klan, they thought, well, hey, this guy, even though we don't necessarily like his race, he's speaking our language. He wants to separate the races, so we're going to invite him over to. And there were, even in the 1960s, there was some collaboration. They would have. There was a Black Panther rally. One time they had a Klansman speaking there. Now there was some booing and hissing in the audience, but still, he was kind of, he was speaking their language, the separation of the races. It's what the left is promoting. They want to have their segregation. They want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to have their ethnic separation. But at the same time, they want them all to come together to vote for Democrat candidates at election time.
Now, it's interesting that when you look at the outcome or eventual outcome of the policies, the rhetoric has changed in the Democrat Party, but it's still segregationist. It's still
interestingly
fundamentally racist. I mean, the black graduation at Harvard.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to mention.
Are you kidding me?
But see, the thing is, and this goes back to the 1950s when they forced integration. If they would have let it happen naturally, you wouldn't have this. Because now a lot of blacks legitimately feel like their culture is being marginalized. They're just being swallowed up in the overall white culture. And the only way they feel like they have to push back against that is they have their own black clubs, their own black graduation. But when you think about it, that's what they had in the 1950s, and that's what liberals destroyed. Interesting story. In the town south of where I went to college, we did a college class on integration in the 1960s. And there was a very affluent, thriving, all-black school in this town of Tuscumbia, Alabama. And I was doing some investigating, reading the memoirs of the teachers at that school after they integrated, and it was heartbreaking to them because they had better facilities, but the teachers ended up getting demoted. The students no longer had the mentorship that they had back when they had the black school. So, and it's a story that's never told. The mainstream media will not tell it. Academia will not tell it because it doesn't fit their narrative. Their narrative is this is a white supremacist country who oppressed minorities, and then minorities. It's basically Marxism with an ethnic flair.
Yeah. I once got into trouble in hot waters when I said in public that I believe state-mandated segregation is just as bad as state-mandated integration. I believe that voluntary segregation is fine, as long as it's not mandatory by law. And I was basing this on my experience with reading about the first few weeks, the first few months of the Jim Crow laws. The people that protested the most were, let's say, white owners in black neighborhoods or vice versa, who are like, hold on a second, you're basically telling me I can't take money from this person because he has the wrong color. Are you kidding me? And so basically, state-enforced segregation has a lot of backfire on it. But same is true with state-enforced integration. And you give this example with the schools that basically ruined something that was fitting, I guess.
Well, I mean, the main problem, and this was the problem that the blacks had with it, is because their schools were inferior in quality. They had, if you went to a white school, it'd be nice and fancy. You went to a black school, it'd be run down, and they didn't get as much funding. So that was a legitimate concern. But the remedy that they took, and it was the Supreme Court that did it. Well, as usual, the Supreme Court is typically the culprit. And of course, if you say something like this nowadays, you'll be run out of academia on a rail. But it's the truth. I mean, the Supreme Court.
Was it Brown versus Scott? I think the decision, or what was it?
It was Brown versus Board of Education.
Brown versus Board of Education.
Yeah, and President Eisenhower was actually against the ruling, but he just kind of took the attitude, it's the Supreme Court ruled it, so we just have to follow through. But yeah, it definitely set race relations back in this country several decades. Whereas if they would have just if they would have dealt with it on the local level, if they would have mandated that each side is funded equally, eventually you would have had volunteer integration in most of the country. In fact, I would be willing to bet that if there had never been a Supreme Court ruling, forced integration, there wouldn't be a single, we would have more integration today than we have today. Because if you look at the schools today, there's almost as much segregation as there was back then. And so what did all that rioting, all that litigation, what did that actually accomplish? We're more segregated today than we were then.
Oh, it did accomplish something. More money for the bureaucrats managing integration.
More money for the lawyers.
More money for the lawyers. So there you go.
The NAACP got a lot of publicity out of it. Got a lot of money out of it.
And a lot of money, of course.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's the thing is when people don't trust freedom and freedom of association, they don't trust people to work out their problems, then they expect the government to force people to get along. That's when you're going to run into problems.
Yeah, because they're not going to get along as long as you force them to get along.
It's like you take two like dog fighters, which I'm against dog fighting, by the way. I just want to say that. But dog fighters, like if they're going to fight dogs, they have to push their muzzles together. They have to push them together and force them. And eventually, you push their faces together. They're going to get mad at each other and start biting each other and start fighting. And it's the same way if you force people together. What do you think is going to happen? You know, if it's not voluntary, then yeah, it's going to lead to problems.
It's going to be some sparks for sure.
And that's just like the crisis, the immigration crisis in Europe today. If you're going to try to force it on countries, I mean, if the European Union would say, look, we have a lot of refugees that are trying to come into Europe. Would any of you countries like to accept them? You let each country decide for themselves if they would like to accept refugees. I believe you would probably have a lot more willingness on the part of countries to accept refugees. But when you say we're going to have a quota system and we're going to force this on you, well, obviously you're going to have the immigrants are going to go to whatever country they want to because the borders are open. But beyond that, you're going to have a lot of racial conflict, ethnic conflict, because you're forcing people to accept people that they don't want to accept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is another thing. I mean, it's now sort of haram to say that, look, I don't have to accept anyone. I don't have to like everyone. There are people that I don't want them in my society, and somehow that's regarded as bad.
Well, and again, this goes back to George Soros' ideology of the open society. Mm-hmm. You know, in his ideology, in fact, and this is one thing I found when I was doing my investigation, he in one interview, he mentioned that his opposition to communism came not because of the economic system, but because it was a closed society. Mm-hmm. And he was saying that the communists wanted to create an international closed society. I want to create an international open society. And so if you say, I don't want these particular people in my society, the progressives would say, no, wait a minute, that's not your society. It's all of our society. Mm-hmm. You know, if we're going to have an open society, that means that we all get to decide. Mm-hmm. And if we all get to decide, that means we all belong wherever we want. Mm-hmm. So that's why I believe, and this is something that Trump is very, very adamant about. This is something that he gave in his speech, he emphasized in his speech in Southeast Asia when he went. At the greatest potential for human prosperity is through the nation state. Yeah. If you take away the nation state, you're going to have complete chaos. If you look at progress, the greatest progress in European history, in world history, was between 1815 and 1914. And that 100 years
was the height of the nation state.
That was the height, and it was the height of the nation state. It was the height of world civilization and world progress. When you look at the increase, and the Mises Institute has actually done a lot of good work on this. When you look at just the wealth that was created in the world between 1815 and 1915, and then compare it between 1915 and 2015. Between 19 and 2015, it doesn't even compare to the massive jump in wealth between 1815 and 1915. And it was the height of the nation state, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the thing is that, you mentioned Brown versus Board of Education. You will be fired for that. Well, Thomas Sowell hasn't been fired. And he wrote entire books about why Brown versus Board of Education was wrong.
Yeah, to quote Thomas Sowell, he was asked, I don't know if you ever heard, there's a libertarian historian named Thomas Woods. He interviewed Thomas Sowell on his podcast, and he asked him, now, how is it that you're able to get away with saying the stuff you do and writing the stuff you do? And Thomas Sowell said, well, the problem that a lot of people make when they go into academia is they're relying on academia for their income. And if you're relying on academia for your income, you're making a huge mistake, because I guarantee you that income is eventually going to go away, and you're going to have to scramble for another academic position. He said, when you're like me and you have 5 or 6 sources of income, you can tell any one of them to go to hell anytime you want to. Yeah, so that's the key. If you're going to go into academia, and unfortunately that bars a lot of people from going into academia, because not every academic is an entrepreneur. He doesn't know how to go out and create several streams of income.
Well, you know what they say, those who don't know how to do things, they teach.
Exactly. And so that ends up barring a lot of potential teachers.
You never get the most qualified ones. Although, to be fair, it's much better here than in Europe, because at least here, if you innovated something and there's basically no one as good as you are, and if you want to start an academic program, it's a lot easier here. Whereas in Europe, if you don't have all the stack of paperwork, there's no way you're getting into academia. So it's a lot easier here with all the bad that is happening. Now, how do we fight this in universities? Because we keep on coming back to the universities. Same in Europe. I mean, the biggest globalists, I'm thinking here, Juncker, Merkel, whatever, they all had some sort of background in academia. So how do we fight this?
Well, it's kind of the same way you have to fight the media. Currently in our generation, there's still, even though with all the entrepreneurialism in media, there's never going to be a second New York Times. The New York Times is still going to be the biggest media outlet there is.
Isn't it like a former newspaper already?
Yeah, it's already a former newspaper, but I mean, as far as revenue, as far as the funding they get, or there's never going to be a second USA Today. Those publications are still going to be there. The only way to combat that is to go around it. You have to create alternative media outlets, and it's going to take time. But eventually, I believe the demand is there. The demand is there. It just takes people to to create the supply to supply. It's the same way with academia, and you're even seeing this now. A lot of times, people are getting better training through online job training than they are in school. I know personally, I learned more about research just a little bit of time I worked at Capital Research Center than I did in my time in university. And so in a lot of universities, because they're going so far to the left and they're focusing on the humanities, jobs now, it's starting to devalue the degree.
Sometimes I'm asking who's going to do the bridges, who's going to build it, because there's so many in humanities.
But see, that's the thing. It creates a window of opportunity for people who want to create alternative universities. And I mean, the huge monolithic university that we have today, that system came out of the post-World War II generation when you had the baby boomers. That system, there's been a lot of, especially private universities, have had to close their doors because they just can't afford it anymore. And I believe we're going to see more of that because there's not as many babies being born, there's not as many in the new generation coming up that are going to require a college education. And that creates an opportunity for entrepreneurs and people in conservative academia to create alternative means of higher education. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, even if they're not, a state university, if their graduates prove to employers that they have the skills necessary to complete the task, they're going to gain a higher reputation than a lot of these accredited universities, because a lot of them coming out of those universities who have, gender studies degrees and women's studies degrees.
And lesbian dance therapy.
The lesbian dance
degrees in Beyonce, and I mean, the list goes on.
Whatever else they create every other day. Yeah, they don't have any hard skills. So this definitely creates, it takes a lot of investment, but it definitely creates an opportunity to go around the big academia.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the less popular topic, the topic of religion, because yesterday I interviewed Paul Elam, and he was talking about how many, churches ended up supporting causes that were supposed to be against them. I mean, you see churches where you see Planned Parenthood speeches in a church, and I'm like, how? What's going on? I mean, give it to me. Give me a rundown on how is that even possible.
Well,
I saw recently. I think it was on Vice America. There's a mass with Beyonce as the preacher. How does that happen?
Well, there's so many denominations of Christianity.
Yeah, it's the most religiously diverse country on earth for sure.
So, I can think of 3 or 4 off the top of my head that would probably do that. Others, in fact, there's even within denominations, there's been splits over the liberalism and conservatism. And a while back, there was a friend of mine that said he talked to an Episcopalian pastor.
You mean heretical?
Yeah, but he was talking to her about the Bible and everything, and she said, he could tell that she just didn't really believe it. And he said, let me ask you something. Do you believe that the Bible is the Word of God? No. She said, no, I don't believe in God. He said, wait a minute, you don't believe in God. Why are you an Episcopalian minister? She said, it's a good job. I get to help people. And that's the thing. Whenever there's always going to be religion around, but as long as the left, just like the left co-opted education, just like the left co-opted the media, they're going to try to co-opt religion because they understand that, you can co-opt the media and education, but you're going to run up against a brick wall when you try to take on religion. So it's much easier to co-opt it than it is to take it on.
That's what the left did in Sweden. Svenska kyrkan, the Church of Sweden today, is basically a far left organization. It's a private membership club of far leftists.
There's actually one of those places right next to Capital Research Center.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really? There's a Swedish church here, Church of Sweden?
Yeah, I didn't know what it was. I just thought it was a normal church, and then they said, that's just kind of like a breakaway from Christianity they created to kind of keep a formal church, but it's not really a church. They explain it to me. But yeah, and a big reason why we're seeing so many younger Christians turn away from Christianity is because their parents didn't invest the time in them, didn't invest the time to teach them about Christianity. They just expected the priest or the minister to do it because that's what happened when they were growing up. But they don't understand this is no longer the world that they grew up in. When they were growing up, they didn't have to compete. The minister didn't have to compete with they had to compete with television, but it was like 3 channels. But, he didn't have to compete with the internet. Didn't have to compete with all these other distractions that they have. So I believe it's a failure on the part of parents to take a role in educating the children, not only on history but on religion.
Right, but then again, some of that is due to the practical impossibility, because the cost of living has gone so far up that parents have to be more absent if they are to be still alive and prosperous. I guess
they gotta work 2 jobs.
They're gonna have to work 2 jobs. You don't have the stay-at-home parent that much, unless you're on welfare, in which case you're poor anyway. So
yeah, that's the economic downturn is definitely a huge factor. But yeah, I mean, I've been thinking to myself, with the economy the way it is, that's the thing. Well, who has time to start a family when the economy is the way it is? And people look at the unemployment rate, but they don't think about the regulations that force employers to only hire people for 30 hours, that forces them to get a second job. Obamacare being a huge example. Obamacare did more to cripple the economy. And people look at the job rate and they say, well, unemployment is down. I mean, he did fantastic for the economy, but what good is a job if you're having to work 60 hours working 2 jobs just to make ends meet?
Yeah, because it counts as lowering unemployment if you get a 4 hours a day job too. So,
exactly. Yeah.
Just because there are more of them doesn't make them necessarily meaningful. Now, the reason I'm asking about religion is because, well, in Europe it's a lot more of a pronounced phenomenon, especially Western Europe. The Intermarium not so much, but Western Europe for sure. The reason it's going to be an even greater pressure from Islam, which is a much more, I would dare to say at this point, a much more serious religion. Because they want to live. They want to live, they want to survive, they want to prosper. Christians apparently they're not. And I'm an atheist, but I'm with Christians on this one because, the alternative is significantly worse. And it's going to happen here too, although not to the extent that it's happening in Europe. For instance, tomorrow I'm planning to go to Dearborn, Michigan, which is, I guess, little Europe, little West Germany in a way.
Yeah,
because the majority of religion is just like in Köln, So, that's why I'm asking about religion, because, there is going to be a competing force that did not exist for the last, well, I guess for the last 300 years, since the Battle at the Gates of Vienna, there hasn't been a serious competition from Islam. And
that reminds me, you mentioned that because of the economy, it's difficult for Christians to educate their children, raise their children in Christianity, but the Muslims do it.
Yeah.
They manage to do it.
And they do it for free.
Exactly, yeah. And sure, they may have to take a lower standard of living than Christians.
But they think long term. They do think long term.
They do, exactly. And that's the thing. A lot of Christian families, especially in the 90s, when the economy was booming, all they were thinking about was the bowling alley. They were thinking about the ballpark. They were thinking about their recreation, their fun and games, which that stuff's fine, but that's all short term. They're not thinking about, are my kids going to raise their kids in church? Are my grandkids even going to know anything about Jesus? Are they going to know anything about Western civilization and all this? And so it's definitely the fault of thinking short term rather than long term. And the Muslims, they think long term. They want to raise. And it's funny, I've been around Muslim families, and the way they act around their kids, I'm thinking to myself, they're acting just like a lot of really conservative Christian families that I was around when I was growing up. You don't see too many of them anymore, but the thing is, the Muslims get it. They understand that if they provide a home for their kids, as a sheltering, a nurturing home, and they raise their kids in the fear of Allah, then their kids are going to grow up just like them.
Mm-hmm. All right. So basically, we're back to the way we started the interview, which is nice. How do we get more people to think long term?
You got to scare people. People are not going to think long term unless they're scared, and a lot of conservatives in our generation genuinely are scared because they look around.
They have reasons to be.
They have every reason because they look at Ireland And they think they look at that vote in Ireland.
Speaking of Ireland, just yesterday, as we're today is what, it's 27th, I think. Yesterday, when we were taping this, Ireland legalized abortion. I never thought that was possible.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And of course, millennials, they voted overwhelmingly for it.
Oh, of course.
So when our when the young conservatives, they look at that, it certainly is frightening, because the thing is, it's not just about whether or not they become pro-choice. These liberals that are in our generation, they have no educational background in classic liberalism. Mm-hmm. They don't understand. They're not liberals.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
They're as illiberal as they can be.
Exactly.
Which is funny because they accuse us of being illiberal.
Yeah. But the thing is, they have completely rejected liberalism. They don't believe in free speech. They don't believe in freedom. Period. Mm-hmm. Their idea of freedom is you get to believe the way I believe. You get to accept who I accept, or otherwise we put you in jail. Mm-hmm. And that's their attitude. They won't come out and say it yet, but when unless the culture changes, that's where we're going to head into. Because the media drives a lot of this by continually attacking right wingers and accusing them of being fascist. Well, obviously, if these people are fascist, then we need to get rid of them. We need to send them off to the gulag. That type of thing.
Yeah, but, I don't even like the terminology pro-choice. I mean, they're pro-choice when it comes to killing babies, but they're not pro-choice when it comes to choosing your school, choosing your education, choosing your religion, voting for whomever you want, and not based on the color of the skin and things of that nature. Yeah, so it's not really pro-choice. How do you transmit this kind of fear, I guess? And I'm sure there's going to be comments, oh, you're promoting fear-mongering. Well, maybe, but if it works.
That's the thing. If it works, if people if they don't appreciate Western civilization for what it is and what it has accomplished,
and especially to understand that it's fallible. I mean, it can be reversed.
That's the thing. Yeah, if they don't understand that the world that's going to replace it, they're not going to understand. They're not going to be afraid. They're not going to feel that fear. And if you look at places like Sweden, like Norway, some of the totalitarian laws that they've passed, some of the things that they've done,
and the United Kingdom.
Yeah, even the United Kingdom. I've only read briefly about the story that recently came out about a guy that was protesting in front of Whitehall, got arrested for protesting.
Yes, and there was also the YouTuber Count Dankula who got fined for teaching his dog to do Nazi salute as a prank joke. And then there is a guy who is now in jail for wearing a potato peeler in public without a license for it. I'm not joking. And there's more and more of that shit. I mean,
especially whenever you have moguls controlling social media, controlling the internet, like Google and all, then obviously it's going to be much easier they don't even need the government to ban free speech whenever
that's what they do in English, for instance. That they're limiting some searches and putting some websites on hate lists and whatnot. One of the websites that I used to write for is now inaccessible in most of Britain because it's a hate site. None of that is done by the government. It's done at the suggestion of the government, but it's executed by private corporations. Mm-hmm. And there you go. That's actual fascism. Actually, it's corporatism.
Yes,
the way Mussolini envisioned it.
Yeah, Hitler couldn't have done it better. If social media had existed in Hitler's day, he would be doing. Germany's policy on social media today wouldn't be far off from what Hitler's policy would be on.
Yeah, there is a TV show, Supernatural, and in one of the episodes they accidentally revive Hitler, and Hitler comes in and picks up a smartphone and is like, can you imagine how much great we would have done if I had Twitter back in my days?
Yeah.
And I think that's true, yeah.
It is, yeah. And interestingly, you mentioned the censorship. The other day I came across a video on Twitter, and it was a group of minorities in Los Angeles that were at a city council meeting that were attacking illegal immigration. Mm-hmm. And Twitter had the video blocked, and they had a message saying this video contains sensitive material.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, is someone getting knifed or shot? And no, it's minorities attacking the city council. I don't even think there was any vulgarity in it. They were just attacking the city council for supporting illegal immigration. And now that's sensitive material because you're going to offend the illegals.
Yeah, that's basically, I mean, it's that kind of soft censorship that's still bothering, but there is also outright censorship. For instance, now on YouTube, you can no longer post a video, basically exercising your Second Amendment rights. That's
Really? They cut out live shooting?
Yeah, all of the live shooting, all of the shooting video, anything gun related actually, except talking about guns, that's still okay on YouTube. But it's no longer okay if I were to be at a gun range and put out a tripod and start shooting. That's not
Really?
kosher
I
on YouTube.
didn't know that. That's incredible, because there's a lot of YouTube channels out there.
Most of them are getting taken down as we speak, or asked to remove them, or put things like new videos are all shut down right from the get-go.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
No.
Well, I mean, conservatives are going to have to create alternatives. That's the only. And another thing, this goes back to, okay, why did we get in this situation? Why do the leftists control Google, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube? Why don't conservatives have any alternative? And the reason, at the National Journalism Center, there was a speaker that gave a very, very good explanation for this. He was talking about new technology, but also like the arts. He's saying, like, when a liberal's child says, Dad, I'd like to be an actor, they say, good, what, I'll fund you, I'll pay for you to go to the best acting school in the country. When a conservative comes to his parents and says, I would like to be an actor, like a stage performer, they say, no, we're not going to pay for that. If you want to go be a lawyer or a doctor or a businessman, we'll pay for that. But they don't. Conservatives have been there's certain acceptable fields and there's certain non-acceptable fields. Well, the liberals, they've been dominating the non-acceptable fields to conservatives, and that's why we're in the situation we are, where Silicon Valley is completely dominated by the left. And while the conservatives,
we didn't fight for it. I mean, we fought for YouTube and got some of the things reversed, and we're doing fine on YouTube. That's why I still exist on YouTube, basically. But we didn't fight for Facebook. We didn't fight for Twitter. We didn't fight for a lot of these things.
I mean, I can't think of it. Has there ever been a conservative that founded a social media platform, a major social media platform that you can think of?
I guess Peter Thiel would be.
Peter Thiel. Okay, yeah, that would be.
But I think he's the only one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's one among very, very few in in California that really.
He's no longer in Silicon Valley. He left Silicon Valley and moved to LA for more freedom.
I don't blame him. Yeah. Interesting. This is another detour, but interesting enough, Starbucks and Amazon were complaining about the law that Seattle put in that was going to basically have a head tax on their employees. They were pitching a fit about it. And I was thinking to myself, I can't have any sympathy for y'all.
Yeah, no.
After you basically supported this government in Seattle, you support their left-wing policies. Now you're going to complain whenever the dog comes around and bites you. Yeah. But it's funny because the Silicon Valley folks, they're really starting to butt heads with the liberals who want to redistribute the wealth. But yeah, that's really a shortcoming on conservative parents by not realizing that we need to fight on the economic culture war, and the only way to do that is if we, train our kids to go into IT, go be actors and stuff like that. That's why the field is dominated by the left.
And in every field, I mean, for instance, even this, going to places, interviewing people or whatnot, there are many conservatives who are doing it.
That's another thing. The conservatives completely gave up on government. They just gave the bureaucracy over to the left. And now a kid, I could just imagine a conservative teenager coming up to, Dad, I want to be a bureaucrat when I grow up. He'd probably get kicked out of the house. He's like, no, you won't be my son if you're going to be a bureaucrat. But it's that. I understand the macho mentality. You need to go out and create a business. You need to go out and be a lawyer, a doctor. I understand that. But if you want to preserve the culture, when you've got a bunch of cultural Marxists that are taking these positions, you've got to fight for every square inch of every occupation. And no occupation. If your kid is willing to work hard, willing to put in the work and be the best he can be at it, then you need to encourage him to do that.
So you're basically saying we're closed-minded, and
conservatives have been very closed-minded when it comes to occupations, when it comes to their kids going into certain occupations.
I wanted to pull a Kathy Newman on you, so you're saying so.
But what?
I wanted to pull a Kathy Newman on you. Are you not aware of the Kathy Newman interview with Dr. Jordan Peterson when she kept on twisting his word? So you're saying we're lobsters? So you're.
I haven't watched.
You should watch. I can't believe you didn't watch that. It's such. I'll leave the link to you. You have to watch it.
Yeah, I need to start watching. I've only watched one or two videos of Jordan Peterson, but anyway, yes. But yeah, like the guy at NJC is like, we conservatives we'll tell our kids, no, you can't do this. But if you want to go work at We Win Fuck You law firm, then that's perfectly fine. That's why the law profession and the doctor profession and the doctoral profession and the banking profession is dominated by conservatives.
Right. Well, I guess that would be pretty much it, because if we go, we could go, and we will go longer over the lunch and maybe a few beers, but if we go longer in front of the camera, nobody's going to watch it anymore. So.
Yeah. I don't want to bore people.
So thank you for coming to my show, and I hope we'll get to meet again pretty much soon. in a short while, and maybe in 2020 we can collaborate a little bit and help a little bit more.
I hope we can. That would be great.
Now, the plan is to come back here in 2020 and get to smell the climate from
during election season.
Yeah, it's gonna be glorious. I think it is going.
I really
yeah. Before we close down, predictions: is Trump gonna win again?
Yes. I'm confident that Trump is going to win.
How bad will things go in Europe in the next 2 years?
How badly could they go?
By 2020.
By 2020, if they really go south, then he only wins the electoral college, doesn't win the popular vote. But as things are going now, I think he's going to take the popular vote as well.
For midterms.
Midterms, I think the Democrats might pick up a few in the House. I'm pretty sure the Republicans will keep the House and the Senate at this point.
Right. And for Europe, how bad things could go there?
I actually think Europe is going to start improving a little bit. We're seeing this a little bit, especially with Italy and other countries, Austria. The problem for Europe is going to be, of course, economics. Trying to revive economic liberalism, because it's really been dead since before World War I, if you really want to get down to the nitty-gritty.
That's true.
That's going to be, but in the short term, I think populist parties are going to start gaining more traction, because the left has completely abandoned their populist base, their working class base, and it's just a wide open opportunity. For now, most of those people are to the left on a lot of economic issues. But I think if conservatives approach economic issues in the right way, they can take advantage of that.
Oh, here's some optimistic guy. You're slightly more optimistic than I am on Europe. All right, Jacob. Thank you so much for coming, and hope to see you again soon. Thanks you all for watching.